Happy New Year, Center Grace family. It's good to be back with you again for these weekly devotionals, and I hope that over the holidays you got a chance to not only be with some people that you really love, but also just do some things that you really love. One of the things that I love is soccer, and I'll do some pretty crazy things. I'll inconvenience myself, whether it's staying up late or recording a match so that I can watch it some other time or whatever. We do some pretty crazy things, right? For either the things that we love or have an affection for, or especially the people that we have a love and an affection for. We drive hours on end to go visit friends or soon-to-be spouses, right? And some people might say that we're crazy for the things that we do for those that we love. And as I was thinking a little bit about that, and as we've been preparing for this new year and what themes we might be able to explore during these videos, one of the things I wanted to think about and talk about with you guys is our affection for God. Are we really growing in our affection for God? If you remember when we were talking about characteristics of disciples a number of months ago, that was one of the 5 characteristics that we gave. We said that a disciple grows in his or her affection for God. That's what a follower of Jesus would naturally do. So not only is it the greatest commandment that we grow or that we love God with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength, but we ought to be growing, deepening in our affection, just the way that a husband and wife should deepen in their affection for one another. You know, Jonathan Edwards, in one of his writings, he said that love for God, true love for him, is one of the only characteristics of discipleship that the devil can't fake, that the devil can't counterfeit in our lives. He was writing and thinking about that passage in Matthew 7 where Jesus said, you know, people will maybe at the end of all things say, look at all the things that we did for you, Jesus. And yet in that moment, Jesus will say, yeah, but I never knew you. I wasn't intimately related to you. And gosh, wouldn't it be just an utter shame and pity if that were the words, if those were the words that we heard Jesus speak to us? And so as we get into this new year, as we think about not only a new series of videos, but as we think about some maybe new commitments that we need to make, let's talk a little bit about what it would mean, what it would take for us to grow in our affection for God. If other people looked at our lives, would they say, man, that guy does some crazy things to grow in his affection for God? Would they say that of us? Would they say that of you? So as you jump into this new year, and as you think a little bit about affection for God, we realize that there are always obstacles to growing in affection. Whether it's growing in relationship or affection for other humans that we're in relationship with, or in growing in affection for God, there are always obstacles to that, right? Sometimes we end up prioritizing countless other things above growing in our affection for our spouses or our kids, right? We're taking them a bunch of different places, but are we really growing in love for them? And the same thing is true in relationship with God, right? Maybe you're thinking about Mary and Martha, that story in Luke chapter 10, at the end of Luke 10, where Martha's busy trying to get her house ready. She's trying to impress Jesus, right, with all the things that she does. And Mary's just there sitting at Jesus's feet. Mary wanted to be intimately acquainted. She wanted to deepen in her affections for Jesus. Didn't mean that a meal didn't need to be prepared, right? Jesus said one thing. Martha, only one thing's really needed for a meal. But Mary's chosen the better portion, and it's not going to be taken from her. And so what would it look like for us? What are the obstacles maybe that are in your way in this new year that would stand in your way of your growing in affection for God? Are there some priorities maybe that you have in your life? Or is your life's pace at such a level right now that you just don't have the time to grow in your loving union with Jesus? So as we think about the fact that there are undoubtedly obstacles, and each of us need to sit down and maybe give some thought, what would be some obstacles that maybe we need to remove or seek to remove so that I can grow in my relationship and affection for God? One of the other questions, quite simply, is how? How do I grow in my affection for God? Well, let me give you 2 quick thoughts. First, you need to remember that just like in relationship with God, it's like any other relationship. Intimacy starts with intention. Unless you intend to get to know someone or get close to that person, it's not going to happen. So intimacy always starts with intention. We have to make a commitment to actually move towards God. Oswald Sanders, a great theologian, once said this quote, as I came across it recently, just struck me to the heart. It says, "Only those who count intimacy with Christ as such a prize worth sacrificing anything else for are likely to attain it." And listen to this last phrase. He says, "We are now and will be in the future only as intimate with God as we really choose to be." We are now and will be in the future only as intimate with God as we choose to be. Intimacy starts with intention. But even before that, it starts with a vision. I think all of us, if we were to ask ourselves the question, do you want to grow in affection for God? You'd say yes, right? You need to wrap yourself around a vision of what your life, intimately acquainted with God, would look like. And then from that vision, move towards the intention of making the decision of, I'm gonna change my life's pace. I'm gonna change some of my priorities. And remember that God has, in fact, given us the means. And that leads us to the second thought. So if intimacy starts with intention, intimacy grows with attention. The more attention, the more focus that we give to another human being or to a sports team or even to God, the deeper our affection is going to grow for those things or that person, or for, in this case, for God. So our affection, our intimacy grows with attention. But here's the thing. Don't start with your love for God. Yes, we are to love the Lord our God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength. But this isn't a bootstrap kind of affection, right? Like you're not supposed to just pull yourself up by your bootstraps and say, I'm going to love God more. To be attentive to God means that we would be attentive to who He is and to what He's done. So in other words, if you're going to grow in your affection for God and intimacy with Him, you need to start with recognizing His affection for you, His deep love for you. Paul says that we're supposed to know the love of God that surpasses knowledge, that's higher and deeper and wider and longer than we could ever fathom. That's God's love for us. Or take this verse in Zephaniah 3:17. God says this of us, "The Lord your God is in your midst, a mighty one who will save. He will rejoice over you with gladness, and He will quiet you by His love. He will exult over you with loud singing." The picture that you ought to have in your mind when you read Zephaniah 3:17 is that of a loving father, a loving mother that is rejoicing over the child that's in their arms. That's the picture that Zephaniah is giving us. And on and on and on throughout the scripture, you can see God trying to display, trying to declare His love for us as His people. And in all of the things that we do, whether it's prayer or sacred reading, and those things are ways that we can be attentive to God, you have to remember that those things are means. They're means to the end of growing in intimacy with God, growing in affection for Him. So church, in this new year, what would it look like for you to be intentional about growing in intimacy with God? What would it look like? What would it take for you to be more attentive to who God is and to all that He's done so that you could grow in affection for Him? We love you guys. We look forward to seeing you soon.